You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 440, our Andor Anthology episode, where tonight we're going to talk about some of the media that may or may not be of significance when preparing to watch the new Andor series, which comes out here in just a few more weeks. This is a show that's been long in the making because we had to delay it and push it out, 3 weeks, and by now I think we've forgotten everything. So we're going to do our best to get through all of the material. But I think we've got some pretty good stuff here for anybody that's interested in getting caught up on things that, again, may or may not help you get prepared for the Andor series. And speaking of preparedness, someone who's always prepared is Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show tonight. Glad that you could be here.
I am so thankful to be here with you, my friend. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. We had a poll, and tonight I am once again drinking my pumpkin spice latte. So
we did not run a poll. Yeah, we did not run a poll, and it didn't matter if there was a poll that said yes or no. You were going to go get one anyway.
Exactly. You can't stop me now. So
that's true.
Hey, well, happy Disney Day to you, by the way.
Happy Disney Plus Day.
Disney Plus Day. Sorry, I think I screwed that up last year too.
Yeah, well, I wish you a happy D23 Expo Day tomorrow too. That's a mouthful.
That should be hopefully better. I'm kidding. Let's start off with that. I mean, we don't really have a whole lot of news, but Disney Day Plus has come and gone. So if you did not know, today was the big hoorah. There was a number of things that were revealed and announced, but not if you were a Star Wars fan. It was kind of what we already knew. And although we got one cool thing out of it.
We did get a really cool thing, and I think it was kind of we knew Andor was going to be part of this, right? Because it's coming out here in just a few weeks. And so it was cool that we got, I guess, this is the equivalent of like a sizzle reel of sorts, but we actually got a nice, few minute clip of the episode.
Yeah.
Pretty sweet. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. And as well as a really good interview with Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna. I really enjoyed, I don't get to hear Tony Gilroy speak very often. I've read interviews, but watching, man, the enthusiasm, the energy he has behind it.
The passion, man.
Yeah. I mean, he was all about it. It amps you up. You're like, man, yeah, let's do this.
Right.
Gonna join the cause.
Yeah.
Gonna be great. I mean, we're all gonna die, but it's gonna be great.
It's gonna be wonderful. It's gonna be glorious death. I thought the interview it had a lot of energy. Seeing Diego Luna talk about the character and the way he did, it just seems like they're so well vested in it. And if nothing else comes, I mean, I have no doubts the series is going to be successful, and I think we're going to get everything we wanted and probably more. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. But even if we don't, the fact that you've got two people like Gilroy and Luna coming into this, and a number of other people, right, as part of the cast and crew who are so passionate about this and doing this the way they did, says a lot about the future of Star Wars, right? There's still people like these guys that are really passionate about telling these stories, which bodes well for us, right? I want to ask you one thing really quickly. There was, I think it was last week, or at least since we last had a full-on episode, there was, I don't know if you call it, Tony Gilroy had made a comment, and it kind of blew up on Twitter, good or bad. I mean, it just, again, it's everybody takes their own point of view with these types of things. But he said that casting Andor was going to be a TV show for adults. And of course, the people that have always wanted, more, quote, adult content, and I don't mean like in sexual way or anything like that, but more adult-oriented content ran with that hardcore, right? They ran with it and was like, okay, this is it. There's going to be blood, violence, etc. I don't think that's what he was saying. No. And then the other people, the purists, if you will, were like, well, that's not really that goes against what, George Lucas had always said.
This is why we can't have nice things.
Exactly. We can't say anything nice or can't say anything at all because people take it different ways. But what are your thoughts about that? And how do you feel about that? I mean, the other thing that, and we don't necessarily need to make it part of the show because it's not in the show notes and I don't want to throw you a curveball here, but Mike and I at one point several years ago got into a discussion on the show about whether or not Star Wars would ever go for older content, like more mature
Star Wars really for kids, right?
Yeah. So, and that's brought up a whole bunch of memories and of us going back and forth on that. But what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I remember that episode. Actually, it was a pretty good one. it's more this adult theme type of thing. You know, kids, I don't know if kids would actually understand some of these things. And I think on some levels they will. But I think also it's really speaking to these generations of people. When you talk about migrants, like Diego Luna has brought up a few times, that's something that's difficult for younger kids to understand. But what I like about it is that while this is a show that appears to be geared towards adult from a comprehension in the story, it's exposing it's kid friendly enough to where it's exposing them to this different way of life, especially if you grew up, here in the US. For a vast majority of people, but not everybody, have not seen this. They just think it's a news thing. It's hard for them to equate that to reality, and to see it in Star Wars or something that they might appreciate. While I'm not assuming that's reality, but it's a certain aspect that would bring a bit more. It'll bring it a little bit closer to them. That this type of story, if they were to go talk to someone in their family, that it might be like, yeah, that those types of things actually happen. There are places in the world that have revolutions, that are in a revolution right now, that have true civil wars amongst their own people. Yeah. And so I think those are very adult themes, but I think they will continue to be presented in ways that are kid friendly or kid consumable, although they might need interpretation from adults. And so I think this is a great balance here. I think it's the adult type of story that the older generations, I think, will enjoy, and that will probably speak to a number of people who feel like this story hasn't been told from their perspective.
Yeah.
I think it's also a way that it's another grittier version of Star Wars, from a really fresh set of characters that we haven't seen since, in about 5 or 6 years. And then also that, just have a very different story for us to tell. And we see a very different way of life and period of time than really anything that we've seen in Star Wars in a while.
Yeah, and I think the key word, the word that I locked in there at the very end was grit. And I think when we talk about Star Wars as being for older audiences, I think that's really what they're trying to go for. I still don't believe that they will ever get into like mature type stuff, content, blood, gore, violence, that sort of thing.
Right.
I can see both sides, and I think that was what I was arguing with Mike about. Is like at some point, and maybe it makes more sense now that they would do something like that. And I know this sounds like heresy, and people are probably shaking their heads and going, "What is he talking about?" But it's probably more possible now because Disney owns it than it did with Lucas. Because I think Lucas, again, he was a purist. He did never wanted to cross that. Now with the cell, right, and you've got things like Disney Plus, you've got opportunities to label this content as for more mature audiences and that sort of thing. I think there is an opportunity for that. And I'm not asking for, Quentin Tarantino style violence, but more mature themes, because the Empire is evil. The Siths are evil. They do
Right.
evil acts. And although we never see them, and I'm not saying we have to see them, but knowing that they're doing them and having people talk about them and exposing people to that, I think is enough to kind of, draw that line between what is a kid's show versus what's an adult show. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, what Gilroy was really kind of alluding to was just that grittier piece, right? The Cassian Andor scene in Rogue One, when he shoots the other agent or whatever his name is, that was shocking for all of us as
Right.
Star Wars fans, right? Because we'd never seen anything like it. We talked about this, right? It was so, everything seemed so pure, so innocent. They were the good guys, and here was the dirtier, darker side of the rebellion. And there are a couple things that happen in this Disney Plus interview that we saw, and in the new trailer and some of the voiceovers, where they're talking about, I think it's Cassian Andor in this one sizzle reel thing that they did, where he's talking about some of us have been assassins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they cut to him putting a gun up to somebody, and look, he's about to shoot him. He probably does, knowing Cassian Andor. We hear in the little, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but Luthen says that he knows that he killed 2 corpos, whatever those are, I guess corporals, back at some planet, right? So he's out there killing people ruthlessly, probably as an assassin, and that's just a side of, again, Star Wars that is talked about when we talk like assassin droids and bounty hunters and that sort of thing, but we never really get to see it, and that's kind of what we're probably going to hopefully see here.
But again,
with
we're,
this
as
series.
Star Wars fans, we're also looking for consistency. And when the example you brought up about from Rogue One, so far what we're seeing and what we're hearing is very consistent with what Rogue One was predicated on.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the dialogue, and while you're right, we didn't really see a lot of that, it's definitely there. And we saw Andor shoot someone in the back.
Yeah.
And so we know what he's capable of. And so, and actually, I know you're kind of putting up hellos there on the screen, but Jorge had a great comment there about, it might be pretty violent. We have Andor putting a gun to Luthen's head.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm trying to remember a time where we've actually had that level of like point blank in the middle of the head, just staring at, threatening someone. And I'm having a hard time. I mean, we've had, guns pointing at people, of course, but
Yeah, we've had like the outlaw stuff, the gunfight type showdowns, but never.
nothing in that kind of a threatening way from a hero.
Mhm.
Right. And so, and again, I think this is where, and they keep saying this over and over, that Andor is not a hero right now.
Yeah.
He's kind of guerrilla warfare in many kind of ways. It sounds like we're starting to get this impression of, yeah, he might be fighting against the Empire, but it's more skirmishes. They're not wars.
Yeah.
And I think that this is where we'll talk a little bit about this video here in a minute, and where that really leads to. And then, I'm glad you got Lauren's comment there. It's probably going to be fine as long as it has a sense of hope at the end.
Yeah.
And I think when you talk about Star Wars, I think that's where it comes back to. And that's what will help it feel like the rest of Star Wars, is that there is this hope that while Andor might be doing things that are morally or ethically wrong,
Mm-hmm.
There's this idea that, I mean, we know that this hope and this thing changes for him later on through Jyn Erso and through this band.
Yep.
And so is this something that will we see in the show? Do we have glimpses of it? And again, it's more about planting those seeds at this point than anything else. So I was really excited. I think this was a really fantastic addition to Disney Plus Day. And I think this is exactly the thing that we were hoping we would see. We still didn't get Mando season 3 trailer, and we sure as hell didn't get anything about Bad Batch. So that was disappointing.
Yeah.
But we did get, so the Obi-Wan Kenobi featurette is now out there. I believe it's an hour long behind the scenes about how they brought this to life. I have not had a chance to go watch it.
Yeah, I have not either.
But I assume it's going to be pretty good. I've actually heard there's some pretty great moments in there, especially when Hayden and Ewan see each other for the first time. So I think that's around what was it, like the half-hour mark or something like that.
Yeah.
So again, I'm sure there's going to be lots of great moments in that. Looking forward to watching that. I think that's going to be cool. But again, am I disappointed about Disney Plus Day? No, not as much, because I know D23 starts tomorrow. And I think I at least prepared myself already, saying that, well, all of the big stuff, anything really new and spending some time, will likely come out tomorrow with D23. Okay, so I think the only thing I was really disappointed about today was still nothing for Bad Batch. Because if Bad Batch is coming out in 20 days from today, it's the 8th of September.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it is, man, we are in the dark.
Yeah.
So what's the money? What's the odds on Bad Batch actually coming out on the 28th?
I mean, everyone that's credible has already dismissed it and said that they've heard that it's not coming out that day. Nothing official still. So I would have to kind of lean into that and just think that that it's not going to happen. This would be a horrible fumble from a marketing perspective for them to not be touting this thing right now for that many days away. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, unless they're going to really give Andor its limelight for the next, week or two, and then hit us hard with the promotional stuff of the Bad Batch. I mean, Disney probably could do that. They have the chops to pull something off like that, but I can't see it happening, honestly.
Yeah. Why would, anyway.
Yeah.
So Jorge is saying that we are going to love the Obi-Wan featurette. So that's cool. And he's saying that now Reddit is saying January 4th. But here's the other.
He's a cool guy.
So January 4th, we're going to talk a little rumor here. So if it's January 4th, when does Mandalorian start? Because I mean, we're here in February.
We're bugging into that time.
I mean, it's the thing. I mean, we are just slamming right up against everything at the same time now.
Yeah.
And I think the only time you really have to do this is it would have to premiere around like Thanksgiving, something like that, after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then you just push Mandalorian back to the point where it would start right afterwards. Or do you push Mandalorian further, or do you just drop Bad Batch in 2023?
I'm with you. I think tomorrow, it seems like we've got to be getting clarity here. So I would hope
Saturday,
tomorrow for D23,
Saturday,
they kind of lay out the schedule and tell us what we should expect.
Yeah, and so just as a reminder, I think tomorrow for D23, it's the video game panel. So we'll get some ideas about the games. I would expect Hunters, some stuff like that, maybe a little bit more for Survivor. I think Saturday though, that's the big day. That's the big showcase, the studio showcase. So that'll have all your Marvel stuff. I'm really curious what Marvel's going to bring because they dropped just bomb after bomb after bomb at San Diego Comic Con. It's like, what's left?
Right.
Turns out there's a lot left. But I mean,
Yep.
it would be really, it'd be great if we could get a lot more Star Wars focused though.
Our day will come, man. I
It
mean,
will.
come on. I don't think we're being, what do you call it? I don't know. I feel like we're
Greedy.
being selfish.
Why?
Well, because we've got plenty of Star Wars.
Yeah, we just want to know when something's going to be out. I want to know when I can get the rest of my Star Wars. Is that so wrong?
Is that so wrong?
Is
Yeah,
that so wrong?
I'm with you.
You don't know me. All right, so hey, but we should probably start getting into the show here. We're 15 minutes in.
Before we
Hey,
do more impersonations.
Real quick from the Cantina Cam, I mentioned this on the, like how I said that, Cantina Cam.
Cantina Cam. I like it. Let's get
That's right.
that trademarked.
I just thought about that right now. So I mentioned that I was starting to get some cool stuff in, and this was an unexpected surprise today or yesterday. So one of the things I got in, one of the guys I work with, his name's Darko, has a 3D printer, and so he made me 2 Mandalorian helmets out of his 3D printer, and this one's like a little half scale. He gave me a 3/4 scale too, but it was in his car, so it kind of warped. I got to fix it.
I like it,
but it's dope, man. And light is dope. It's like, solid. It needs a little bit of sanding and a paint job, but
yeah.
I mean,
it's like Grogu style or Grogu size.
It really is. It's like almost like if you've collected or seen the the little miniature football helmets and baseball helmets that they sell for collectors. It's about like that size.
Nice.
So it's absolutely perfect. And so a little bit of sanding, a little bit of paint, and it's gonna be pretty neat.
So you're gonna take this on as a project yourself?
I just thought about something. Well, maybe I'm not much of a project person. I just thought about something though.
Okay.
You have a cat named Sabine.
Yeah.
And a cat named Ezra.
Yeah.
I wonder, this might be cat sized.
We could stick it on one of them and see how it goes.
Yeah, I like this. Or as Lauren says, baby in the bubble. Yeah, baby in the helmet.
Bubble size. That's talking about Grogu again.
Yeah. Anyway,
baby in the bubble.
I just wanted to share that because that was pretty neat. And again, thanks to Darko for all that. And he said he's thinking about getting a full size 3D printer. And if he does, then he says he's going to make me a full size one too. So
yeah. Look at Gary over here swinging for the fences to get on your side.
I like where Gary's going. That Mando helmet would make a great beer tap handle.
Yep. I
love you people. I mean, man, we have some of the best listeners ever. Gary, you win the internet today.
Yep. Congratulations, buddy.
Yep. You are Cantina Cam fan of the day. Like I did that too. It's like we're at a football game. Because you know what? Today's the first day of the NFL season.
All right.
I'm a man of many interests.
I can see that. What's going on in Patreon? Let's talk about that before we get into the show here.
Yeah, Patreon. Hey, big welcome. We did this on the Patreon show on Tuesday, but welcome back, or welcome to Dale, longtime listener, joined the Green Milk tier this past week. Huge thanks to Dale. We're glad you're with us. Longtime listener, one of our favorite folks. So huge thank you to you. Of course, now part of the tribe members, Mike, Kathy, my notes are in the way, Rob, Lauren, Dante, Risk, and Justin. Thanks for being a part of that. And then, of course, the Rod tier. And actually, Rod messaged and said, I love it that you guys call the Rod tier. I get such a kick and a giggle out of it. So it's the Delusions of Grandeur tier, but code name Rod tier. Is great.
And it's only until the next person signs up for that tier, and then it's that person's tier. So I'm just saying, if you guys want your name called out and,
and have something assigned to you.
Yeah, have something assigned to you, then
now
get on
now
that.
Rod's going to decrease his amount.
That's fine. I would too, honestly. That's kind of a jerk move on my part.
Right. So we've got next Tuesday on September 13th, we have the top 3 deaths in Star Wars. This is where we are inviting our Patreon members onto the show. And so if you're interested in that, please do reach out to me either on Patreon or Discord, cantinacast.com/Discord. And then the big one though, next Thursday, September 15th, we have our listener Q&A, which is always one of our favorite shows. cantinacast.com/question. Real easy form. You can fill it out more than one time if you have more than one question. You can put their feedback. As Albert so astutely pointed out on Tuesday, please make it Star Wars related. I don't know why he feels it necessary to point that out, but
I want to
make sure we support one another. We are a team. So we do this together. We're a team. Please make it Star Wars related or Star Wars adjacent.
Star Wars adjacent, yeah.
Anyway,
get us your questions. We need more, and those are always fun. So you can hit us with anything.
And I'll hit some more stuff out on social media starting this weekend, as well as we get into next week. Hit it really hard. So please, if you're listening, if you're within the sound of my voice, please go to cantinacast.com/question.
Cool. And I've got
And
it up
that's it.
and it's going away. Okay. Let's talk about all the stuff that we think may or may not be related to Cassian Andor, or things that maybe you should prepare for by watching, reading, viewing, listening, whatever you do. Let's start with what we've been talking about, which is the Andor. What was it called? It was called a Disney Plus Day Special Look, was the full title of that. And we talked about the beginning, started off with a interview with Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna. The one thing that stood out for me, and we haven't brought it up, but Luna talks about being a migrant, that Andor is a migrant. And migrant can mean a couple different things, but in the context of what he's saying, it does sound like Cassian Andor was kind of forced out of where he normally lives in some way, right? So
Right.
From here on, by the way, there's going to be a lot of speculation, and we are going to talk about this stuff. So if you're trying to go in pure, there may be spoilers, but it's only spoilers for stuff that's been released, right? We don't do spoilers for stuff that has never been shown or approved by Disney. So with that said, for me, when I hear that that he's become a migrant, that he was forced into that, so it sounds like his family has been displaced in some way, or worse, maybe he's captured for some reason and brought in to do labor of some sort. But the one thing that stuck with me was that he said he was forced away from where he belongs. It takes him many years in his life to find something to fight for, even if it's an idea. And we've talked about terrorism on this show before. I think it was part of the Rogue One discussions at one point. But just
from time to time, yeah.
yeah, or we talked about, I think, in Saw Gerrera, and we're going to talk probably a lot about Saw Gerrera here. But Saw Gerrera is someone who very much aligns with that terrorist mentality, right? He's fighting more for the ideals and feels that, to coin a phrase, sometimes you got to break a couple of eggs to make an omelet, right? And we'll talk about some of those examples that we see here in some of the stuff that he's already been in. But it does sound like he is following an ideal, meaning that maybe he is getting swept up in this whole kind of, for lack of a better term, I'm gonna call it terrorism. All right, assassin terrorism. But then there's also a side of him that sounds like he's out there just trying to earn a buck. Especially when we see the footage a little bit later when he's trying to get that couple thousand credits for whatever he got for Luthen there. So, anyways, what are your thoughts, I guess, on Andor from that perspective as a quote terrorist or someone who's aligned himself with an ideal rather than a cause?
Well, it's this idea. I mean, you're trying to survive. And I think a lot of this is just, unfortunately, migrants, when they're forced out of their home or they're forced into some sort of servitude, you're just fighting to live day over day over day.
Mm.
I mean, we see this in real life. We see it in Star Wars often. It's talked about a lot in Star Wars in particular. So it shouldn't be a foreign idea that this is possible, and that not only do you hold a grudge against these folks, so you're trying to steal from them, you're trying to take things and make money off of that, but also sabotage things that you feel are, destroying your home, or this is his adopted home now. And it's unclear if he really has any attachment to where he's at as an adult. We're given that impression that maybe, yes, he does have some of that he's, willing to fight for, but again, it's this idea that everything that he had that was once his has been completely taken away from him.
Yeah.
And when that is, you feel like you have nothing to lose, and you're just scratching to just survive. And you'll just do whatever you need to. And you grow up in that environment. If he's been doing it since he was 6, to coin his own phrase, and now he's, call it 19 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a long time to be living that lifestyle and not think that these things are just what it takes. This is what my life is and what it looks like.
Yeah.
Is what I have to do day over day. And it's difficult to fault someone for that way of thinking when that's reality. And it's not like I'm gonna step up and be the better person today, when you have the Empire just smack you over the head with a gun. I mean, it's just the reality of what they're doing, and they're just doing what they can to try to make some level of a difference. What I think is interesting, though, is that Luthen is giving him this other idea at the very end. I thought it was a very powerful statement. Was, what if I could give you a way to actually make a difference? What if I can actually give you something you can actually do something that will make an impact, and that will actually take it to these, I won't use the word he used because we try to be a bit PG-13, But yeah,
Yeah,
you
he
know,
says,
something.
don't you? Yeah, don't you want to fight these? You know what? For real?
Yeah, these B words. And so yeah, it's a but I mean it's a great quote. And when you're talking to a young man in particular like that, with
Mhm.
that's grown up in this lifestyle, and clearly just has it out for the Empire because of what they've done to him and his family.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you appeal to. You appeal to emotion, right? That's the best way to get someone on your side. You appeal to emotion. You piss them off, and then you say, I can give you a way to channel all of that anger, and we
Yeah,
can
and
actually
Palpatine
do
did.
something. Yeah, and we can actually, well, yeah, hopefully in a more positive way, through terrorism. I mean, not for a
Right,
kid,
yeah.
but I mean, that's how this stuff. That's how revolutions begin, right?
Sure.
You get enough people who think that way, and you've got the start of something.
And he also literally dangles money in front of him too, right? I mean, he had 1,000,
I'll give you an
shrugged
extra
it off
1,000.
for another 1,000, like no big deal. And Andor's like, holy bananas, where's this guy get all this money from, right? I mean, so
Right.
there's that prospect of I can get rich from all this stuff on top of the promise of being able to take the fight to them, at their heart and do more damage and right. He's pulling all at his heartstrings there in a couple
Well,
different ways.
but Andor's a bit dubious about that though too, right? Because
Mhm.
he's like, who are you? Answer my questions. How do you know all of this information about me at the same time? Because it's like too good to be true. Because again, are you just here to stab me in the back? Are you just trying to root me out so that you can, hang me in the streets? Their words, and which is pretty incredible
I
to think
kind
about
of
in Star Wars.
well, yeah, yeah. We'll come back to that here in just a second. But I kind of took him because it was a very visceral reaction the minute he mentioned his father, right?
Hmm.
And I want to talk about that in kind of its own little bubble here in just a second. But the way I interpret that is Andor has done everything possible to maintain his secrecy, right? He's covered his tracks many times over. He's probably killed loose lips, if you will, at times to make sure that information didn't get out. And somehow Luthen knows, and I think that to me really it shook him. Right, and that's why he has that reaction that he does, and walks up to him and puts the gun up to his head because how could this guy even know who I am when I've been literally working and living in the shadows for so long, and yet he knows some very specific details. There's something about that that's very intriguing for me about from
And he has
Luthen's
money,
perspective.
right?
Yeah,
And he
he's
has
got
money. Clearly, he's an
Um,
Imperial, right?
well, maybe.
But I mean, that's the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
thing in his head. He's
Yeah,
thinking,
exactly, right. Yeah, he's probably going off of the extreme that this person's, not who he says he is, and he's ready to go ahead and put this guy down as he probably has other folks that got too close to him. Um, so before I want to come back to that here in a second, but the other two things that stood out from that interview were they mentioned that the rebellion is popping up everywhere. So this is something I really want to see. I mean, if you look at broadly and holistically all of the Star Wars content that we've got up until now, that kind of that kind of frames what we think is the rebellion. Everything from the Cloud Riders, maybe all the way up until Rebels, when we finally get to that episode in season 3 where Mon Mothma calls everybody literally together to start the rebellion. We hear about it a lot, and
Mhm.
we've seen little bits and pieces of it, but we've never really seen just how many sects are out there, how many of these little pop-up rebellions have started. And there's something for me personally, there's something fascinating about getting the opportunity to see that. And when I look at the cast, and I may be overthinking this, but when I look at the trailer and some of the footage, there's so many different people they keep focusing on. And I'm just wondering if we're going to get kind of like, a couple different stories, and eventually they're going to just kind of come together and form their own little mini kind of rebellion cell.
Kind of like Rogue One with
Yeah, kind of like
Sheridan
Rogue One.
Bays and yeah.
Yep. Which I think would be really interesting to see, because I think with every one of these groups, they bring something different to the table. They may have different ideals, they may have different wants and needs, but at the end of the day, I think they all kind of serve. They're all kind of serving that same purpose, that unified in whatever it takes to bring down the rebellion. And they'll go to great different lengths and all that, right? Of course, which I think is that part is the really intriguing piece to me. So I really enjoyed that they said that. I love that he said that the characters had purpose,
Yeah.
which is very important. But the one thing that I've seen most people talk about so far online is the fact that they filmed this with an actual like orchestra on
Oh
set.
man, you stole it from me.
What?
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, they actually had music on set.
Yeah. And they showed the lady. I mean, they showed the little flute lady playing there at one point. But
the flautist, they had a French horn. Right?
the flautist. Okay, yeah, fine.
Flautist. Yeah.
Fancy guy. Flute lady was much more proper in my head. But yeah, the flautist. Isn't that no, it's flauta. But a flautist.
That's
was
all I'm
actually,
saying.
so they have people on set playing this music, and like, we just came off the Light and Magic episode, right? And we were talking about how Kathleen Kennedy had said that they were trying to bring, some of the post editing stuff into the actual principal photography, right? When it's actually happening in real, like, can you get any more surreal or more submersive than actually having the music play in the background from real people getting you emotionally like stirred up? And I wonder like what that's going to do for some of the performances from these guys. I think it's going to do wonders,
You
honestly.
literally walk into your theme music.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
blown away. When I saw that, I was like, "You're kidding me, right?" Like these guys are serious. I mean, and I was looking at the footage. I was also, kind of looking for, maybe where the volume may have been used or not. And I kind of talked about this before. I'm still
yeah.
convinced the volume is still being used in here somewhere.
Well, and you wouldn't know it now because what we found out, I'm like, ooh, that's the volume. It's got to be now because it looks too real. No, I'm kidding. Go on. Sorry.
Well, there were definitely some scenes with green screen in the back. So I think there is still, some traditional green screen stuff going on. I still think like when young Andor is staring out at the, at the mining,
Yeah, that's
the
gotta
strip
be
mine,
something.
that looks, I would imagine that's not a green screen. I would imagine like, just put them in front of the volume. It would work. That type of scene would work. Okay. But anyway, yeah, the orchestra though, I was just blown away. I mean, that is just incredible. And why I never thought that would be a thing, that baffles me because, well, it does make sense because with instruments and stuff, having them outside
Yeah,
in dusty, dirty environments is not good for them, especially string instruments, but any kind of wind instruments the same way.
it's just the money problem, though, right? Just throw money at it, get it cleaned up. And
Dude, these
bring
things are
it back.
expensive. As someone who owns a very expensive string instrument, it is yes, no, you don't do that.
Okay.
You don't have
All
them
right.
outside very long and that stuff in the sand. Sand, it gets everywhere.
Oh my gosh, stop it.
And as in Brotherhood, we know it gets in all the joints and stuff now too. So
Hey, we're going to talk about one of the Rebels episodes tonight, and that line is in there talking about sand. It's Sabine who says it of all people. But sorry,
oh, lovely. That's going to be a 45-minute dissection.
45-minute breakdown on that one line. But no, sorry, I didn't mean to.
But no, you're talking about immersion. Immersion, absolutely. I mean, I can't imagine I really want to see the performances, and I want to know which scenes they actually did it in because I want to see if I can feel that. And now I'm going to watch it. I'm going to be like, is that the scene? Is that the scene? Is that the one? This is pretty powerful. That's pretty good. Is this the one?
Mhm.
And so, damn it, Disney.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. So, okay, so let's talk about the footage real quick. I think we've pretty much covered everything that I at least had in my show notes, except for the big one, which is they hung his father, right? Just to kind of, we've been talking about, when we were talking about kind of speculating how did Andor get pulled into this, and I think we had theorized that there probably was something that was done to his family members because it felt so personal, right? And we were only going, this is even before we had seen the trailer. We were going solely off of his performance in Rogue One. And how do you get a 6-year-old embedded in something like this, right? Entrenched in something like this, an ideal of sorts. And usually there's some kind of trauma that's involved. It usually involves some, parental figure or a brother or sister. And it sounds like this might have been that catalyst, right? Or that kind of turning point for him. If they, if one, yes, he got forced into being somewhere where he's not, but then on top of that, he was witnessing his father being hung. That's probably enough motivation for somebody to really go, you know what, I'm going to get back at them in any way possible I can. And to point it out, it's very similar almost to like the Saul Guerrero story in that, what was his purpose? What was driving Saul Guerrero? Saul Guerrero was 100%, he is 100% driven by getting revenge for, let's just call it what it is, right? It's just literally revenge for what they did to steal his sister. So same kind of parallel going on here where Andor is out there for revenge, essentially, after what happened to his father. Maybe there's more to it, but what did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the part I really like about it is it really feeds into what Luthen is trying to advertise to Andor there at the end of it too, of like you can actually stop fighting these little fights and actually fight a war, and do something. And again, when you think about the emotional toll this takes, if you're trying to chip away, it doesn't really feel like you are making any progress. I mean, yeah, he probably feels good about himself in some smaller ways, but they're losing. I mean, every day the grip is tighter, right? And so
Mhm.
if you're given the opportunity to actually do something special on a grander scale, you can really leverage that pain and actually feel like, okay, maybe this is the one thing I'm able to actually go there and do if I can trust these people in that kind of way. And I think that's going
Yeah.
to be the interesting part of the story is how that is he manipulated in any kind of way, or does he feel manipulated maybe more so than actually being manipulated
Mm.
into becoming and being shaped into this weapon, into where we see him in Rogue One, where you have a bit of that conflict coming through, that he doesn't have to be this sharpened blade that they've made him into. So I'm curious what kind of conflict that's going to bring in within him, interpersonally between him and the other characters, but also just internally, if he's okay with that, or if he's already kind of past that point anywhere. This is just a next logical step for him.
Yeah. No, I think we're in season 1. I think we're going to get the answers to that.
I mean, that's probably what all season 1 is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because season 2, I think we've got some. I don't know. We'll talk about it on this show, but we've kind of shared some thoughts and theories around what season 2 would look like.
Right.
Okay, so there was one other thing that came out today, and this is so brief. If you've not had a chance to go see it, Good Morning America had, I want to say it was like 20 seconds, 30 seconds of footage that we've not seen before.
Okay.
And it's essentially Cassian Andor. He's being approached by these two people. One's an alien, huge alien, looks really cool. I think his name was Fletch or something, or Fetch or something like that. I couldn't catch the name, and there was no subtitles on it. But he's basically being. It sounds like he owes money to somebody, and these were the two guys that came to collect on that money. And Andor knows the big bulky guy who seems kind of like a really dummy, meathead looking creature, which is kind of funny in itself. But that was really it. There was nothing more to it. I don't know if they were trying to show that just to kind of have an exclusive of some sort, but we have no context whatsoever. That was the really weird thing about this clip. It's like, okay, cool. Like it doesn't even, you can't even get how this fits into the story at all. So I don't know. It's,
It's almost like a late night interview where they show you 30 seconds of a film. You're like, okay,
what?
what were we just, they shape it up for you and it really didn't help at all.
Well,
You're
yeah.
like, okay, I'm
Well,
still
even then,
lost.
like when you're watching like a late night show, they'll set it up, right? Oh, okay. This is in this scene. I'm doing this, blah, blah, whatever, whatever. And then they play the clip. That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
They did nothing. The guy was holding a cupcake. They cut over to the clip. They came back. He's still holding the cupcake, and they promoted that Andor was coming, in a few more weeks or whatever. And that was all.
Those were vital, important pieces of information you just share with us that
Yes.
we cut from and then back to
the cupcake.
someone holding a cupcake. Yes.
I like cupcakes. It made an impression on me. I don't know what to say.
So which was more appealing to you, the 20 seconds or the cupcakes?
The cupcake. No, that creature is the most appealing thing. Honestly, it looks great. I can't tell if it's special effects or practical effects, but I can tell you when you look at Diego Luna and he's looking up at this thing, sometimes it always looks a little weird, right? Because they're supposed to make eye contact.
Yeah, the angles are never quite
The
right.
angles are
Yeah.
sometimes off. It was really exposed in the Phantom Menace, the Phantom Menace, but that's not a critique because they were pioneering that stuff right at the time. But now it's like sometimes you still see it where they're kind of looking, but their eyes are over here. But no, this was spot on. It looked like he was looking at whatever this thing was in its full. Not only the eye contact. I know I'm getting way too. I said I wouldn't do this, but not only the eye contact, but like the depth, I guess, or the girth of the character. Sometimes they don't take that into account, and they're only focused on a single dot, and it exposes itself sometimes. I didn't see that in here. So there you go. There's your 60-second analysis on that one thing.
All right.
That I said I wouldn't do. Okay. Does this guy know how to party or what? All right. So that's it for Disney Day. Let's talk about
Disney Plus Day.
Whatever. Disney. It's whatever. It's Disney Plus Day. You're right. It's Disney Plus Day. And that's the Good Morning America stuff.
It's something.
It's something. Okay. Let's talk about some of the things that we have watched recently to get ourselves prepared for Rogue One. And I think everything on our list was pretty good. Like not to pat ourselves on the back, but I mean, it's kind of it's almost a no-brainer, but unless you're going out there and looking for it, then, you may not think of it. So hopefully if you guys want to go out and watch this stuff, feel free to do so. I think it's worth the experience, and there's some really good stuff that you can revisit as part of this. If you don't, then we're here to kind of tell you why and what you could, what you missed if you didn't see it or you don't want to see it. So maybe
Yeah,
it helps frame some stuff in Andor.
I'm kind of curious about your approach. So when I went into this, I'm like, okay, what are the things that, if I wanted to know like where we were at in this time with some of the characters we know,
Yeah.
I kind of boiled it down to just a few to make it kind of palatable. It was, Saw Gerrera,
Yep.
because we don't really know anything about Andor at this moment in time. So I kind of set Andor aside, but Saw Gerrera, we know is going to be a big character.
Yep.
We know Mon Mothma is going to be a big character.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really hard time thinking about anybody else, but the things that I did want to go and revisit are where's the rebellion at, and then where is the Empire at? Because I think those are almost characters of their own accord, because they're these embodiments of the overall struggle. And like you were saying, if there are pockets forming all over the place, it's important to know where the rebellion is at in this moment in time and how it compares with the things that may have come a little before and after, where we're at in this timeline. So
Yeah.
those were the things I kind of focused on. Was it similar for you, or did you have something else that you had worked into it?
Exactly the same things. And again, I guess that's why I said it's kind of a no-brainer. It's kind of a short list. It is the Saw Gerreras, it is the Mon Mothmas, it is the Rebellion, it's the Empire. There were a couple things in here that one thing in particular that I would add to it, but I think it's going to be more for season 2 is Galen Erso.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that in a little bit when we talk about Rebel Rising and Catalyst, mostly Catalyst. It's really not even Rebel Rising because he's not even in that. But, he is at the very beginning, but that's another story. But Catalyst is really focused on Galen Erso, and there's some really good stuff in there. Should they get into that in season 2, where I was kind of theorizing that, well, no, I'll save it. Because I don't even know if I've actually talked about this theory on the show. So I'll save that. And we'll come back to it in a little bit. But Galen Erso would be the only one I would add in there as well.
Yeah, good point.
So why don't we start with the Clone Wars? And I'll let you take this first one because this was a total of 4
the
episodes?
the Onderon arc. Yeah.
The Andor arc. So kind of give a quick summary of what it is and then what stood out for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is our introduction to Saw Gerrera and where Saw comes from, and why Saw, you start to see why he is the way that he is, and his attitude in really, I mean, it just grounds you in who Saw Gerrera is. I mean, when they introduce him, the Separatists are trying to take over. They've kind of taken over their planet, their city. They want to fight back, and so they're getting this training from the Republic, from Anakin, and from Ahsoka. So it was really a really important arc for Ahsoka as well.
Yeah,
and also from Rex. And so, but of course, Saw and his sister Steela, right? I think it's her name, Steela Gerrera. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Steela is really she's the one with the brains. Saw's the one with the muscle and the arrogance and the fortitude to go and push forward and just kind of do whatever it takes. So an interesting dichotomy between the two of them, which I think is going to play into Saw and Mon Mothma's relationship. And so I'm really curious how Luthen works in all of this too, because Luthen kind of, to me, feels like he might be in the middle somewhere. But also, when he loses his sister and she dies for the cause, you start to see something really break in Saw and snap about something that was taken from him. And in Star Wars, I think what's really important, in Star Wars, we've seen so many characters come back from that. We don't let them stay in that place. We pull them back. We give them this hope that Lauren was bringing up earlier, as long as there's hope. And it kind of seems like Saul might get there, but no, every time he has an opportunity for that, it just seems like he's unable. Every once in a while he makes the right call, but then he just doesn't.
Yeah.
And so by the time we come back to him in later content, especially into Rebels and stuff, we start to see the Saw that we'll see a lot more of in Andor, I think. But it's really important for this arc to get you established on who Saw Gerrera is, where he comes from, and just on a real high level. That's what's really important about this arc. What were a couple of moments in there that you think are really vital for people to really catch, though?
Well, I think you kind of covered them all, because I don't want to. We're going to talk a lot about Saw Gerrera tonight on the show, because he does come up in some other things, and I think it's more about, again, the idealism that he has is very reminiscent, similar to what Cassian Andor is going through, and so I think it's important that we continue to keep that in context and we talk about it. However,
that's a good point. That's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
That said, though, I want to ask you a question about something, because as I was watching that episode, and Anakin, right? Like, so where did Saul learn? I mean, he had his guerrilla tactics already, and they were kind of fighting the fight, but they were being trained by somebody like Anakin Skywalker. How much do you think? I don't put a lot of weight into this, but how much do you think Anakin's whatever it takes mentality was influencing Saul Guerrero at a younger age? I wouldn't say extremely young. I mean, he wasn't a teenager or anything like that, but I just wonder how much of Anakin's influence kind of helped mold Saul into the person that he is now, and allowed him to maybe go to the extreme in the way that he did.
It's always it's an interesting premise to explore about how people view the Jedi in general. Is it whether they should be the Jedi that do things at all costs, or should they be more of this peacekeeper mentality?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you want to view them in that kind of way? And I think this is where Saul probably viewed Anakin and was like, no, this is a person that understands it. He gets it. But why is he holding back?
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those, like, and again, I don't know that we really get a great idea of Saw's perspective on the Jedi. I'm trying to remember if we get any of that in Rebels, like after the fact. And we probably do, and he probably smudges them a little bit, but
it's actually the opposite. But I want to say that 'cause it's
Okay.
actually a cute moment that we'll talk about here.
Okay, yeah, and again, I can't remember all the details on some of this, but yeah, I think again, it's sometimes it's like, okay, well, that's this model right here, but I think he also, when he was witnessing the Republic, they were training him, they were always holding back. They always wanted to play fair.
Yeah.
And so it always felt like they were just on the cusp of losing, and they had to take all of these extra chances just to be able to, just to survive, not only just win. And it wouldn't surprise me if he laid that at the feet, of that band for his sister's death too.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of, even if they weren't directly responsible or responsible at all, because they really technically didn't get involved, kind of, it was still that environment, that war that brought that to his doorstep. And so hanging on all of them, and then they're not willing to do what it takes to win. They won't even fight, at least officially. It's just cowardice. And so I think you do get that ingrained in his head of like, no one else is going to do this. I got to do it myself.
Yeah.
And if they're not going to do what it takes, there's no one else to do it. I have to protect my own.
Mm-hmm.
He's not necessarily doing it for himself. He's doing it for the people around him too, in his own kind of way. It is a very good comparison though with the way that Anakin works. It's very self-serving,
Exactly.
but when it's necessary, he protects those closest to him and around him because he really does care. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of about himself in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And there's when we get to the Rebels episode, I actually wrote down what he says about that very thing. So it's I'm glad you brought that up, because
Right.
it's a little skewed, of course, because of just who Saul Guerrero is, right?
Yeah.
The lens that he's looking through all of this is kind of whacked in a
For
lot
a
of
sane
ways.
person, it's difficult to kind of comprehend sometimes. Yeah.
Yep. Those two episodes, if anybody's interested, was it just 2 or was it 3? I forget now.
I think it was either
Was
3
it
or
4?
4. Yeah, I
Oh
think
my
it was
gosh,
4.
that's right. I
Usually,
just thought about that.
yeah, usually Clone Wars episodes or arcs were in 4.
So that's in season 5. The first one's called A War on Two Fronts.
Right.
And then Front Runners, the soft war, and then Tipping Points. So it's a good arc. I really enjoyed it. I definitely
was.
recommend it. Especially if, now it's interesting too, if anybody doesn't know, what's his face doesn't voice Saul Guerrero in those episodes. This was
Forrest Whitaker. Yeah, it's
Forrest Whitaker. This is pre Rogue One, so it was a different actor. But and I think his eye color changed as well.
Mhm.
I think that was a big deal when Rogue One came out. We were talking about the eye color changing, and like how dare they change Saul Guerrero's eye color?
Little did you know all the change you were going to have to be prepared for.
Right, that was just the tip of that iceberg or asteroid, whatever it was. Okay, so check those out. I think it's important in the context of where Saul Guerrero is is birthed and where it starts. And we don't really see a lot of him beyond that. Not like visually, at least on screen. We don't get a lot of him until we get to Star Wars Rebels. And we'll kind of cover that here in just a little bit.
But you wonder about like the rebellion. And again, if we kind of pull this back over to the rebellion side of things and where they're at, it's moments like these small factions that learn these types of tactics that are what making the rebellion get a bit of a name for itself too, about how they've been somewhat effective in dinging the Empire here and there and being somewhat of a nuisance at some point, but how they have to mature away from those types of tactics because those types of that's a war of attrition.
Yeah.
It's not a strategy for success. It is just who is going to outlast the other.
The other person.
And it's at that point, it's usually a numbers game. I mean, the Texans fought valiantly at the Alamo, but it was still a numbers game at the end of the day. You know, Texas
You're
history,
such
folks.
A Texan. You're
Well,
such a Texan.
But it's true. I mean, they were inside of Garrison, but still, 200 against thousands.
Yep.
Probably millions if you listen to a Texan. Man, millions of soldiers out there.
There weren't that many.
Lasted 2 years on the front.
Okay. All right, Davy Crockett, settle down there. Okay. Next up, let's talk about the Revenge of the Sith deleted scenes.
Yeah, our introduction to Mon Mothma and the birth of the rebellion of sorts.
Yeah. So here a couple things. If you want to see these, go out to YouTube, type in Revenge of the Sith deleted scenes, or if you've got I forget which set. I don't think it was the Blu-ray set that had them. I might be wrong on that. But one of the sets are released.
It may have been the Blu-ray, yeah.
Okay. If you've got that, you can go watch the deleted scenes. And there's some pretty good deleted scenes, but I get why they cut them out because, I mean, that movie's so long as it is.
Yeah, and they were slow.
They are slow. I get that. And really, they're not... I guess where the problem that I have with recommending these, like, I want to recommend them because they're really good to watch. But at the same time, they do and say things that maybe have been changed just a little bit, now that we've seen Rebels and Rebel Rising, Rogue One. It's a little different. So I wouldn't put too much weight into it, but I think they're interesting enough. And I think there are some things that are mentioned there that may resurface here. They may like repurpose them or again in some way. But
what are some examples then?
Well, I'll give you. Let me the three scenes at least are called a stirring in the Senate, which takes place in Bael's office. Then there's Seeds of Rebellion, which takes place in Padme's apartment, and then there's confronting the Chancellor, which was one of the best ones, I think. I really wish they would have kept that in there, but I think it changes the context of the movie, honestly, and so for Anakin and Palpatine's relationship.
And that's one that's probably the most change, I think, from where we're at now, most likely.
Yeah. But that confronting the Chancellor takes place in Palpatine's office, and so some of the things that I feel like were maybe just a little bit different. It sounds like first off, it's got Bail Organa in all these scenes. Mon Mothma's in all of them as well. Well, I can't remember if they're in the last one, but nonetheless, they're in the first two, and they're kind of leading most of the discussion along with Padme. I forget who these other people are. They're like some of them weren't very good actors. I'm just being honest, but so maybe that's why they cut them out. But the things that stood out to me are like this idea of the delegation of 2000, right? That somehow 2000 senators came together and created this delegation of 2000, and they were supposed to challenge Palpatine so that he wouldn't continue to amend the Constitution, which I always forget there was a Constitution like that was established by the Republic. I don't think we talk about it enough. I don't know that I've ever seen it. I know in Legends it was mentioned, but in canon, I don't even know that it was really discussed.
We should ping some of our contacts at Lucasfilm Publishing and say, hey, we need you to publish the Constitution of the Republic.
Of the Republic, yeah. But nonetheless, they have a Constitution, and kind of what we get in these deleted scenes is that ever since Palpatine came in, he starts amending the Constitution, and he keeps amending it, allowing himself to give more power and more control, specifically in the way of governors. And governors is something that did make its way into canon when we get to Star Wars Rebels. There was a couple characters in there that were actual governors. I think we're going to see governors in this particular series in Andor. I think it's probably fair or feasible that we'll see those. But the conflict is that now that he's putting these governors out there in charge of the systems, the Senate now feels like, well, what is our purpose? Like, what are we, we're no longer in control. And, at the very end, Palpatine's trying to assure them, oh, no. What the governors are doing, their duties are not going to conflict at all with what the Senate's doing. But the writing's on the wall. And Bail won't stand for it. Mon Mothma doesn't want to stand for it. They want to do something about it. And what I found particularly interesting was how passionate and how aggressive Senator Organa, Jimmy Smits, was in these scenes. Like, he was wanting to fight a war immediately. He wasn't going to back down. And so what they were trying to do is kind of paint this picture that's like in these offices, in these three scenes, that's how the rebellion kind of got started. And now we know it's much more than that, which we'll get to here in a little bit. But what are your thoughts, I guess, on these three scenes and what stood out for you?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of the same thing. It was mostly this idea that there was contention. Now, I think the thing that doesn't work so much today, and why I think if you were to watch them in preparation for Andor, is you have to take with a bit of grain of salt, was that was very early days, and it seemed like it took much longer to really get any kind of broad support for it that weren't very localized, right?
Yep.
Now, granted, some good ideas that have a lot of passion up front, the reality of that, falls apart very, very fast too, because especially in this changing, and the Emperor was changing things so quickly and so often. And quite honestly, we know that while he wanted to rather control the Senate rather than off, the ones that didn't, abide, he wasn't above assassinating those that he thought were actual, credible threats, or some that weren't important enough that could go have an accident.
Mm-hmm.
He also didn't want to draw any attention to himself, so he's not stupid in that regard. Right. But I think so. These scenes, while I think they're important from an idea of who are these characters and why, did they feel this way right after the Republic fell, and where are they coming from, and where are their passions, and why? What are their motivations at that moment? I think they're interesting to keep in context and perspective, but not put too much weight on them, because they have changed so much in canon over the last, 15 years now, 20 years since Revenge of the Sith almost. Yeah.
2003?
Yeah. So 2005.
2005, yeah.
So I mean, getting close to 20 years. So I mean, it's a long time for those things to evolve, especially across several television shows and, a couple of movies. So again, I think important to see where Mon Mothma, I think to be introduced in a more formal way, I think it was great, especially Genevieve O'Reilly's, the person playing it.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
So our first introduction to her, and that's where we have had her ever since. But not putting too much weight on them, I think is most important, because I think of all things, I think Rebels really does the best job from a visual on screen perspective of really giving you an idea of who Mon Mothma was and the rebellion at that moment in time, but also giving a bit of that history lesson as to who the rebellion is and where they've come from too.
Yeah, and I think part of it is kind of this natural selection, if you will, right? So they got rid of those three scenes, and I think the characters' motivations are still true. Like, you get the sense that Organa is probably still going, or not, sorry, Mothma is probably still going to try to do what she can within the Senate, right? She truly believes in the Senate, the power of the Senate, and the power, like Padme. All they got to do is get 2,000 people together with a petition and go to Palpatine and say, "Look, we don't agree with this," and he's gonna change his ways.
Doesn't have a choice, right? Yeah.
Whatever. He just laughs at them like, "Yeah, get out of here, get out of my face." He called him a committee, which I thought was hilarious. So I think from that perspective, it's the same, because when we get to Rebels, that's exactly what she was doing. She was trying to fight things so long in the Senate. I mean, she has this great conversation with Hera at one point. I don't want to ruin that, but when we get to that, she has a conversation with Hera. And she tells Hera, "Look, I've been trying to fight this battle now." So remember, Rebels starts 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, right? So think about it, from the time of Revenge of the Sith up until then, however long that is, that span, it's a good chunk of time.
14, 15 years, yeah.
Yeah, so she's been fighting this battle from within the Senate this whole time. And she finally gave up and decides, okay, this is it. We're just going to have to do this, via war. And she calls out the Emperor and all that. So we'll get to that here in a little bit. So the point is, they expanded that because I think it gave them some runway to actually tell more stories in Rebels about what this looked like and all that stuff. So from that perspective, I think it makes sense. I think they're still aligned in terms of what they want. But you're right. It doesn't really align with exactly where we are today with
I do like that they've kept true to those characters, and even Bale, is willing to go that route too, but he's also willing to work on the side.
Yeah.
A little bit too. I mean, Padme was kind of that way to an extent, but it's interesting when you even bring it to Leia, right? Leia, I think for all intents and purposes, was kind of trying to, well, no, she was probably following more of her dad's footsteps than Mon Mothma. Their relationship's always been interesting, but anyway, it's not really about Leia right now, but
yeah.
Anyway, that's Revenge of the Sith.
Okay. No, that's good. I want to talk quickly about Rebel Rising.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever covered this book. I don't remember if we did.
No, we haven't.
We did.
Well, not me.
I think it might have been Mike.
Maybe Mike. Yeah.
I don't know. It's been a while, man. But first off, as an aside, I forgot that Beth Rivas is the writer for
Mhm.
Rebel Rising. And so now I've got a totally different outlook on The Princess and the Scoundrel, because I was like, I'll get to that when I get to it. I wasn't really excited about it, but I actually really enjoyed Rebel Rising a lot. Like I know I talk about that book quite a bit, but it is such a good book. Um, and I think she did a really good job writing that book. So hopefully that translates into Rebel and Scoundrel. We'll see. Okay. So now that I've said that, um, this book is solely focused on, Jyn Erso. When we think about Rogue One, she goes into, well, we didn't even talk about Rogue One yet, but okay. So she goes into that little cave thing, right? And then Saw Gerrera opens it, and he's like, "Come, come, come, child," and takes her out, and they leave. And next thing you know, she's older and in prison, right? Well, Rebel Rising covers that span of time from the minute she meets up with Saul. What happens to her, what she does with their relationship is really the primary focus. And the best way I would describe this is it really changes your, as awful as Saul Guerrero can be, he's such a good person in this book to her at times. Like, it's not all the time, right? He's still got a. It's another one of these stories where, this person, this older person, has been put into this father figure role reluctantly, almost to some extent, right? He's having to raise essentially a girl, or who he treats her like a daughter by the end of the book. Spoiler alert.
Right.
But it's a struggle, right? He's starting to he has to raise her, and he raises her the only way he knows how, which is teaching her espionage and teaching her how to fight for herself and use a blaster and use batons, which we see her is supposed to be like her primary weapon at the end when we see her in Rogue One, and he teaches her all about terrorism, basically.
Yeah.
But the one thing that stood out for me, I guess, is there is a character in this particular book, and her name is I forgot the name now. Let me go out to my notes here. Her name is, as I'm scrolling down, I think it's Edessa. Yeah, Idrissa Barak. Okay,
Right.
so Idrissa Barak is a character that has connections with Mothma and the rebellion, like one of the main rebellion cells. And what you get the sense of in Rebel Rising is that Saw Gerrera is out there fighting these battles, and it's still early on. He's still not like the grizzled kind of really crazy guy that we see in Rogue One, but he's getting there, and he's doing some things that are very questionable, killing innocent people, just to kind of be blunt about it,
Yeah.
for the sake of trying to establish fear. Right? He's trying to scare the Empire, and again, that's the definition of terrorism. But he's going around doing these things. The main rebellion forces, the people with really a lot of power, a lot of money, they know about Saw Gerrera. So we're talking about the Mon Mothmas, we're talking about the Bail Organas and the Luthans and whoever else that's in power. So they're all well aware of what Saw Gerrera is doing. What I found interesting, though, from this is that this character, going back to her, Idrissa Barak, she has contacts with the Mon Mothmas and the Bail Organas, but she's almost like a liaison to Saw Gerrera. So she goes back and forth. Eventually she ends up kind of helping raise Jyn, because Jyn needs like this, womanly figure in her life or whatever. But I wonder if like somebody like her could pop up in the series. And that's why I'm bringing this up. It would be interesting to see her as kind of that person that's as a liaison that brings Saw Gerrera in there. There are other characters as well. I mean, there are a lot of people in this book that we don't know the fates of. Some of them die, some of them live. But he's got so many people coming in and out of the rebellion that are coming into his area. Some stick around. Some are like, whoa, this guy's way too extreme, and they leave, they bounce, they go to another group. So if you want to know more about like Saw Gerrera, what he's doing with the partisans, right, which is those fanatics that we've been talking about, I can't recommend the book enough, to be honest.
Yeah, it's kind of critical reading, I think, from that regard, because, and this is where some of what Jyn starts to have a bit of a problem with Saw is the tactics, his willingness to sacrifice others and then, for the greater good kind of thing. And that and you kind of feel that in the Andor trailer, right? Let's just call it war, greater good, whatever. It's just war. And there are casualties, there are collateral damage in war. And a lot of that gets established in this book. And it's a really good example of who Saw Gerrera is, especially in this moment in time. And I think it's going to be brought out in spades when we get to Andor too. So I think it's really critical reading in that regard to understand, if you really want to understand who Saw Gerrera is in this time frame, Rebel Rising is probably the best way to go about doing that. All the other ones give you a bit of an idea, but probably not in the kind of brutality, terrorist kind of way that you get in the book.
Yeah. So yeah, check that out, and you get to see a lot of those guerrilla war tactics and just to what extremes they'll go to, the partisans will go to in order to kind of send that message. Um,
So let me ask you a question. This is off
mhm.
script. Do you think we'll get a Jyn Erso cameo,
So
even if it's a child? I don't know
it's
if we're going to pick up Saw when she's still a kid or she's going to be gone by that point. But
yeah. So the way the story is laid out is at first, Saw Gerrera has an old Clone Wars like base that he's made his base, right? And he's working out of there, and he pretty much keeps her sheltered. Like he keeps her in a room. Eventually, he allows her to kind of come in, listen in, and she starts hearing these people talk about killing people and sabotaging things. And I mean, it gets more extreme. I wouldn't say out of the gate it's like that, right? But
Mhm.
as she continues to get older, she really wants to start doing stuff, and he eventually lets her. So, I mean, I'd have to go back and do the math to kind of see where this lines up, but I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of impossibility, right? You could have. I think it'd be really cool if you saw Gerrera, and depending on again where this takes place and in terms of the timeline, what if it is Jyn Erso who's just in the back and they don't even have to say anything? You know, they've already like she wears that shawl. I don't really want. I'm gonna get off on a tangent here, but she wears that shawl in the promo. You remember in the
Mhm.
promotional stuff for Rogue One, and she doesn't really wear it a whole lot in the movie.
Yeah, I think it's on the
But
poster too, right?
yeah, on the poster she's got it. So there's actually a whole story behind that in the book, by the way, if
Oh,
you really
okay.
want to know. But that's kind of one of her telltale signs, right? That she wears this thing, and the reason why she wears it is to hide the kyber crystal. Because yeah, remember if they knew that she was Galen Urso's daughter,
Yeah.
they would be up in arms, right? So one at some point in the book, someone sees that and they realize, wait a minute, why does she have a kyber crystal and we're out here trying to kill these people that are hoarding kyber crystals and doing something with kyber crystals? And so he tells her to wear that shawl. So the reason I say that is because it would be kind of cool if there was a younger girl who had that shawl on, dressed like Jen Urso, and even if they didn't say anything, right? Even if they don't call her name, the fact that we know that she's there would line up with the book because she was allowed to kind of travel and eventually she goes on missions for Saul Guerrera. So yeah, I think it's in the realm of possibility. I just don't know if they'll go that
Right.
far.
I mean, and clearly Jen and Cassian Andor can't cross paths. That
Right.
wouldn't make that. I don't think that would be a good idea
No,
for
no, no.
them to do that. Yeah.
No, and that's not I wouldn't say that either. But if there's a moment where Mothma and Guerrero are talking, or Organa him are talking, or maybe it's just a hologram of Saw Gerrera, and in
Yeah.
the background you see that figure,
That'd be kind of cool. Yeah.
that'd be kind of cool. I'd like that a lot. So good question. Next caller.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, go
Let's
ahead.
talk about Rebels, I guess. Is that all for Rebel Rising? Is
Well, I
that
want
kind
to
of the
yeah, that's
core?
all for Rebel Rising. I want to ask you about Rogue One though, because we were kind of
Sure.
we started to get into a little debate about whether or not we include this as part of the watching. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you're watching Andor and you've not seen Rogue One, I don't know what you're doing.
Well, you had a great argument for it actually, even if it's more season 2. So why don't you share kind of where you were coming
Oh
at from it?
yeah. So again, going back to so I had an honorable mention that we're not going to really talk too much about, but I had Catalyst down as another kind of hey, if you want to get ready for Andor, maybe this book will help. Catalyst is really about Galen Erso, and it starts with the birth of Jin, and he's imprisoned, and you really get the sense of like he's really never been around her, which makes that last scene where he's telling her Stardust even more depressing and sad. Uh, but I think what would be really interesting and intriguing is we know that in Rogue One, when when Cassian Andor hears the name Galen Erso, like it lights a fire under him. Like he's
Right.
like, "Whoa, Galen, you know where Galen Erso is," kind of thing. I forget the line exactly. But what I was hoping, or what I'd like to speculate on, is in season 2, if we are going to get an older Cassian Andor, maybe we get the origin with him eating K2SO that's aligned with the comic. Hopefully not, because it wasn't that great. But if we did, I would love to see that kind of be a focal point where he is trying to track down Galen Erso, right? Like
Right.
that is one of the missions that he's given, and he's elusive. Galen Erso is protected by the Imperials at that point. He's already kind of uh, fake this I deserted everybody and I'm now with you guys 100% type thing when he's really
Yeah.
not, because he's trying to set up the Death Star to with a fault and all that. But yeah, I think it would be interesting for him to be kind of on the chase, and I think it'd be a great way to bring in, what was his name? It was one of the Mickelson guys, wasn't it?
Yeah, Phil Mickelson. Not Phil Mickelson. That's a golf.
That's a golfer.
Uh,
It's not
Mads.
somebody.
Mads.
It's Mads. Yeah. Okay, so it would be great. Was it Mads?
Yeah, Mads.
Or was
Mickelson.
Mads Thrawn?
Uh,
It's one of them. One does Thrawn, one does Galen Erso.
well, Mads Mikkelsen, he's the one that did Doctor Strange too, right? Doctor Strange as well,
Yes.
not Doctor Strange 2, but he was. Yeah,
He was in Doctor Strange. Yeah.
Right, he was.
I don't know.
I
Let's
forgot
look
the
it
name
up.
of the character.
Ash is here. Ash, look that up for you. So thank you. No, but seriously, I think it would be cool to see somebody like Cassian Andor, like trying to find Galen Erso and on the trail of what was really happening there, because Saw Gerrera's on that trail too.
It's Mads Mikkelsen, by the way.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool, thank you.
Confirmed.
But yeah, it would be cool to see them like they know something's going on. They know that kyber crystals are being gathered and they're doing something with them. But that whole idea of the Death Star, when it's really like, even if he doesn't know, because he doesn't know by the end of, he doesn't know really in Rogue One. They just know that they're trying to. Well, no, I guess he does by the very end. But you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
I beat this dead horse already.
Well, again, yeah, in season 2 of Andor, if you want to have Galen Erso be part of that story, Rogue One starts to really become a lot more prevalent because there's a lot of Galen Erso story there and a lot of kind of leading ends, and then also, like you said, Catalyst, which is about that developing story. And so I think those make a lot of sense, especially as we get into season 2. This is likely to focus more on Andor though, and where he's at, and so I think Rogue One still has value from that perspective, and as well as for Saw as well. But I think what it still does for Andor is it still establishes why that intrigue and that mystique as to why he is so invested in it and what do these things mean. So they kind of whet your appetite a bit to say, okay, why do I care about this character? What are the things that make him interesting? What are the where is this conflict coming from? How does that character change? How did he end up in this place in the first place? So I think, do they help you understand the character coming into Rogue One? No, but do they help you understand the journey the character is about to go on, like an Anakin Skywalker through the prequel trilogy? Yes. And so it kind of depends on your perspective about whether or not that's something you want. Now, granted, go watch Rogue One. It's fantastic. So, I mean, go do it if you haven't done it already, which if you're listening to the show, odds are you've probably seen it more than once. But
yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's a no-brainer. Rogue One's in there for all the right reasons. So we're not going to talk about it. There's plenty of stuff that's in there, though, of course. Okay, let's talk about Star Wars Rebels. Now, Rebels is interesting. So there are, let's see, I guess I got 3 episodes. It's the Ghost of Geonosis for me, I think. They kind of set some things up, as well as Secret Cargo, which is the one that includes Mon Mothma. So the Ghost of Geonosis, that is 2 episodes. And then later on in season 3, there's Secret Cargo, and that is 1 episode. And that's almost like a Mon Mothma exclusive. So let's talk about the
is
Ghost
that
of
the one
Geonosis first.
Okay, yeah. So that's the one with Saw, right?
Yeah, that's the one with Saw Gerrera. And I guess the summary of that episode is Saw Gerrera went out on a mission. I guess, and I would say this mission was authorized, if you will, by Senator Organa and Mon Mothma. Like they kind of approved it, sanctioned it, if you will. And they went to they went to Geonosis and they disappeared, right? And so they reach out to the Ghost Crew, and the Ghost Crew needs to head out there and go find out what happened to these folks. That's kind of and along the way they meet Click Clack, which we talked about this I think on one episode when we were covering Rebels at one point. So go back and listen to that if you like. But long story short is there is one Geonosian that's left, and his name is Click Clack. He has an egg that is a queen egg, and the whole reason he's the one on this planet. He's the one that kind of took Saw Gerrera's forces out. He's established. He's kind of reprogrammed these droidicas, and these B1s, and he's made them almost as a defense force for him, so that he can
zombie
hatch
droids.
this egg. What's that?
Is this the zombie droids?
Yeah, the zombie droids that he repurposed. And that's kind of the gist of the story. What's really interesting about this story is that this is the first sign of, like, at least visually, like in Rebel Rising we see this, of course, but for us this is our first introduction of like how much Saw Gerrera has moved away from where we saw him
Mhm.
just in Clone Wars to where he is now. And it's, it's Rebels, so they had to keep it a little bit light, but he's disturbing everybody around him because he's very forceful and he's trying to hurt this Geonosian and everybody, and of course, Ezra is the one that's, the sympathetic kind of, I can understand what he's feeling and saying, so he's trying to stop him and, that sort of thing. Um, but I think there's some really good points in here that they talk about, and I'll get into those in a little bit. But what did you think about? What are your thoughts, I guess, on this particular episode?
Yeah, this is where you start to see the brutality of Saw, I think, coming through really clear on screen. But I think the other interesting part about it is that by the end of it, you still see the humanity in Saw Gerrera, and so he's not all the way gone. He ends up sparing the life, and so it's almost this idea that there's still hope in Saw that he can turn it around, and Ezra's faith in Saw, understanding, and his own kind of conflict is what makes the story really interesting, I think, as well, because Ezra is such in this middle ground, at this stage of the show. And so I think but that's what I liked about seeing Saw was that, yeah, you get a much more brutal version of him, which we were a little bit surprised about. But yeah, he pulls back there kind of at the very end, and to where you think, okay, yeah, there still is some humanity left in Saw Gerrera, although it really does feel like he's starting to crack a little bit. You're on mute. You're on mute. But what you were saying was super compelling. You're still on mute.
I didn't realize I was on mute. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
it's the button with the microphone.
Yeah. I had another screen on top. Sorry. So some of the things that I think that are said in this episode, Saw Gerrera at one point says the mission takes priority.
Yeah.
Right.
Again,
And that's
at all costs, right?
at all costs is right. And then and he goes on as part of that same conversation a little bit later. He says, we are in a war and war is loss. Right. So that very cold black and white
Reminds you of
perspective.
Vader, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a Vader. I mean, there's things that are borderline, like he's not force sensitive, but he does things that are borderline like dark side kind of thing. But at the same time, like we talked about earlier, where it's coming from is where the conflict exists, right? And it's interesting when he comes into this episode and he's introduced and they find him. Again, he's the sole survivor. Like Rex is like, hey, they're like they do like the meme, predator, fist kind of handshake type thing, right? And he's got really positive things to say about Saw Gerrera. And by the end of the episode, he's like, okay, maybe this isn't the same guy that I knew back on Andor, right?
Right.
So we see that they're really good friends. Hera says some really good things about him. She says, they knew each other from their reputation. So Saul knows Hera. He knows what she's been doing. She knows what he's been doing. They both kind of have this positive light. Although later on she tells Kanan, like, okay, keep your eye open for this guy because I've heard some really good stuff, but at the same time, he can be a little extreme at times, is what she tells him. And then later on, he's got so going back to what we said about the Jedi, he makes a comment to Kanan and tells Kanan that we lost the war because of you, blaming that meaning the Jedi, right?
Right.
The turning of the Jedi is really what made them kind of lose everything. And then he also says, our enemies show no mercy, neither can we. Again, more extreme views from him. And now going back to, and here's the one that I said I wrote down about where you mentioned Saw Gerrera is kind of doing this, like in his own mind, he's doing this not just for him, he's doing it for everybody.
Right.
But he says, literally, I'm fighting for you and everyone else not to lose what they got, and I won't apologize how I do it. So, yeah. I mean,
again, no one else is going to do it. He knows what it takes.
Yeah. So yeah, very interesting perspective, at least where he's coming from. And again, I think you're right. At the very end of it, he does allow the Geonosian to live, and so and then they kind of give you this happy, smiley ending where I think it's Hera says, "I've got issues with Saul, but he proved he's not the Empire, and for now, that will have to do."
Right.
Alluding to that for now, meaning later on, people are going to have some really big problems with his tactics and how he goes about them. So
right.
But yeah, I don't know. Beyond that, I don't think there's much there. I think we're going to see that Saw Gerrera in this episode, though, right? And probably a little bit more extreme as well.
I think so. I think what we'll see in season 4, in the Name of the Rebellion, I think we see again more of the Saw that we will see a lot more of in the Andor series as well. And
Yeah,
we'll
that's
talk
the
about that
one
here in a
where
minute.
they're the big kyber crystal. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't write that one down.
Yeah, there were more of just a couple of interesting little quotes, but you want to talk about Secret Cargo though? This is where Mon Mothma kind of throws down the hammer on the Emperor though.
Yeah, I got a lot of show notes on this one. Apologize. So I'll try to keep it brief, but I don't ever do that. So, um, so this is a really great episode. Like it's one of my favorites, honestly.
It was really
For
good. Yeah.
a lot of different reasons. We got Mon Mothma making an appearance. There is Captain Vander, and Vander is he shows up in this, and he's part of Goldwing. I think he is Gold Leader actually in this
Yeah, Gold
particular
Leader.
episode. But then we see him again in Rogue One. Of course, we see him in the Battle of Yavin in Star Wars Episode 4. So he's got a long history here, but we get to see him kind of really early on, which I think is really cool. You got Mon Mothma being voiced by Genevieve O'Reilly again, so staying consistent with that. But really, where I think this one is why this episode is particularly of interest is because this is where she finally lays it out on the Emperor, like publicly. She goes out and damns him publicly on the HoloNet. I'm assuming it's a HoloNet. I don't know if they ever really say, but she goes out and damns the Emperor for what he's done. I want to see. Let's see, where was it here? She says, the Emperor has crushed freedom over the years bit by bit. I have opposed him where I could, but I've begun to see that the fight cannot be won in the Senate. And she's saying this out loud, like publicly. And
Yeah, it's being recorded and broadcast, right?
yeah, exactly. And so she's pretty much signed away her
Yeah, she
role
signed a
as
death
senator.
warrant. Yeah.
Yeah, she's done. She's leaving the Senate. And of course, the rebel crew is watching this and like, wow, like this chick has some, right? Because she's saying this so publicly about the Emperor at this point.
Zeb's just in the back laughing.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah.
Oh, by the way, Chopper's great in this episode. My
Oh, he
goodness, he
is.
has so many good moments. I love that droid. I think he is my favorite droid. I think I've said that before, but anyways, but yeah, she's called a traitor at that point, and the story goes that they end up picking her up because the transport ship that she was on gets kind of damaged. They didn't know that she was going to come onto the ship, of course.
Right.
And then it turns into Ezra jumping into a Y-wing. He gets to fly one of those, which is really awesome. We get to see Thrawn. We get to see the TIE Defender program come into it as well. And at the very end, she kind of there's a great moment in there. I think I've already talked about this, but while all of this is going on, she has this moment where she's talking to Hera, and she's talking about how she's really tried to turn the tide of the Empire through the Senate, and nothing has happened. The Senate is pretty much a lame duck body of politics or a governance at this point, right?
Yeah.
Which is why the Emperor dissolves it, anyways. By the time we get to part
No, but it was
4.
all intentional. And again, this is the part of the episode that's really important, I think, from a Mon Mothma character. Well, in the formalization of the rebellion too happens here, but it's very much that Mon Mothma really has been trying to do things through the proper channels, if you will, or at least in the most forthright legal way that she can, thinking she can make a difference within the system. And this is where the whole flaw of, well, I can make a better impact if I join the system and I'm inside, as long as it doesn't corrupt you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And she just got, beaten time and time again. And the Emperor is the one who has everything locked up. And he's intentionally locking it up and locking people like her out from being able to do is discrediting senators like Mon Mothma. And so I think these are the things that she alluded to in that discussion with Hera. This is where it's going to be interesting if we fill in those gaps. And it seems like a very real possibility and high likely probability that we are going to get those examples. And this is why it wouldn't surprise me if we did get the Emperor in some limited capacity, even if it's a HoloNet type of thing, about what is going on. Again, it's more this broader context of the galaxy within the smaller scope story of what's going on with Cassian Andor. But the politics aspect of it and what Mon Mothma is trying to do, and how close she's getting in some ways, but maybe how she's just getting closer to being caught. And I think that's why it makes this episode, which is, I think, episode 18, season 3, so important for that character to understand. This is the first time we've really had her speak out since Revenge of the Sith deleted scenes, of any kind of dissension for her, publicly, and then actually doing something about it and actually calling them a rebellion.
I think, yeah, and I was just thinking, I wonder if she's gonna be outspoken in this series, and I want to, I feel like she won't be. Like, it seems like if she is, maybe it's kind of a season 2 thing, because she mentions that they're all around her, right? They're constantly listening, constantly following her. She's almost got this, sense of paranoia because of what the the Empire is doing. So I don't know that I wouldn't expect her to be so outright spoken about things. Now, I think she's still trying, she's a very complex character, of course, like most of these characters are, right? I
Mm.
believe that she is constantly trying to do the right thing through the Senate, through the right means and right mechanisms. But however, I think we're going to find out that maybe there are things that she can do on the side through somebody like a Cassian Andor or a Saw Gerrera, under the table kind of dealings, right? And I think that's
Well,
where Bail
clearly
Organa probably
through
comes in.
and clearly through Luthen, yeah.
Yeah, or through Luthen, which it does feel like he's going to be another one of these
He's going to be
um,
that middleman type of,
middleman person. Yep. So
yeah.
that keeps her clean, but he still has he's got the dirty side to him to kind of help pull the strings and make some of this stuff happen. And I want to go back on one thing. I misquoted. So that thing about the that she's been trying to fight years by year, or the bits, or trying to fight over the years, whatever. That's what
Mm.
she was saying to Hera. What she actually publicly says, and she first prefaces by talking about a massacre that happened. And I don't remember if that was something shown in Rebels or not. It's not important. But she says the massacre is proof that our self-appointed emperor is little more than a lying executioner, imposing his tyranny under the pretense of security. We cannot allow this evil to stand. That's what
Gauntlet.
she says
Yeah,
publicly.
gauntlet throwdown.
Yeah, like that's the middle finger right there over the HoloNet.
Yep.
So yeah, so super important. And she talks about this meeting. So again, this is going back to Revenge of the Sith. This is she talks about a meeting that's going to happen, and kind of an Easter egg. They mentioned that they're going to Dantooine, right? And so when we get to episode 4, when Leia gives up,
Right.
the rebel base, she says they're on Dantooine. Well, now it's referencing the first, the old rebel base that she was mentioning is actually this one here, which is
Right.
the very first one. And they're, she's going to Dantooine, and she's making this call to anybody that'll listen to say, look, we're here. I've left the Senate. I publicly said all these things. They've already called me a traitor. And all I'm asking is that if you want to help join this fight, come join me now. I don't know how they get the coordinates out. It's not important. But the episode ends with suddenly all of these ships coming out of hyperspace into their area. And she says, this, my friends, this is our rebellion. That's kind of how it ends. And so that is the birth, like the official birth of the rebellion, which kind of, again, contradicts what we saw in the Revenge of the Sith deleted scenes.
Which leads me into the follow-up episode that I think is important is 0 Hour. I believe it's 2 parts. This is, again, season 3, but episodes 21 and 22. And this is where the rebellion is completely torn apart. And
Yeah.
it just speaks to the readiness of the rebellion. And again, looking back to where this series is going to take place, it's still not put together. It's still fragmented. We're getting that feeling from Luthen already. And when they do try to coalesce and actually make some sort of concerted effort or coordinated effort, they don't have it. They just don't have the numbers. They don't have the skill. They don't have they just don't have that coordination and that, just the common unity that's needed for an army to actually make a difference. And so they suffer significant losses. It just shows you how delicate the rebellion is in this
How
frame,
fragile,
in this
yeah.
time period. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's why I like this episode for that, because it tells you, it just shows you, and it's like Empire Strikes Back, right? We feel pretty good coming out of A New Hope. The Death Star is destroyed. The Empire, we're kind of led to believe the Empire is on its heels. Maybe it's got cracks now. And then what do? They just come back and it beat you down in Empire Strikes Back in every possible way. Right. And so it kind of felt like that, of where this is back to reality. Here's our hope. But reality is that you are still a long ways away from doing it. And so I expect a lot of that from the Andor series too, where it feels like we're making progress, and then the bottom is going to drop out. The floor is going to drop out. And we're going to take steps back. And that's going to be interesting to see how the characters handle that type of failure in a lot of ways, and what that does to their individual psyches and what their trust with one another about how reasonable is this rebellion anyway. And you can understand why people have doubts, like Jen Erso and Saw Gerrera to an extent too, of why they believe this thing doesn't work. And so anyway, I thought it was a really good episode. I think it's a good preface to see some of the challenges that I think Andor might witness and why he might align with the Saw Gerrera in some kind of way.
Yeah, there's I'm trying to think like where the rebellion gets codified, and uh, there's stuff that happens in season 4. There's a couple episodes in season 4 where they kind of hint at things. The establishment of the B wing and a couple of other little Easter eggs, but somewhere by the end of Rebels and prior to Rogue One, they do come together as a group, as a cell.
I thought this was, I thought Secret Cargo and that was supposed to be that moment
Yeah.
where it actually, the rebellion is the rebellion.
Well, I meant like they get
Even
their crap
though-
together is all I'm saying. Like where they're not as fragile
Well,
at that point.
Rogue One, we kind of see it there too, though. I mean, it's still a mess.
Yeah, they
even
were
at that
still
point.
splintered. Yeah, they were both they were arguing about whether or not to attack the Death Star. It's true.
And that's kind of the point. They're never really quite on the same page until they get that first actual taste of victory, which isn't until,
Skywalker. Yeah.
well, I mean, really kind of Scarif in some way, where you actually have something was successful. It was your first major offensive that wasn't a complete train wreck, even though it ended up being a train wreck, but you still got something of significant value out of it.
Yeah, I can see that. But the only so I'm like how much time passes between, and I'm not being argumentative. I'm actually trying to think this through. So
Yeah, sure.
Scarif happens, right? And then
Yeah.
we get the end of Rogue. We go right into episode 4,
Right.
and that happens over the span of what? Couple
don't know.
days, weeks?
Yeah, a few days.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess is that enough time for the Battle of Scarif to kind of, harden them or solidify them or coalesce them in the way that we would expect? The way we see them, I think, by the end of, I guess going into Empire, because in Empire they get their butts kicked too. So I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, they are more of an entity in the Empire too. And then, I mean, from a full assault, type of thing, Return of the Jedi, you see it more as an actual, common interest army, goal, Navy, and all of that. But I think it's still one of those things of when do you consider yourself a group? Not necessarily how good you are at it. And I still think it was in Rebels. I think it was season 3 in Rebels where they said, we all have a common goal. We all know what we want to do, but how successful they are at it or how well they do it, of course, is going to be all over the place for a long time. But I think that's actually when it was codified. I think you could actually say that is the actual formal birth officially of the rebellion, even if it's still very, very fragile in that moment.
So Ash says the first time the rebellion fully comes together is in Return of the Jedi. So what I would say to that is, I don't disagree. I think I know we do this a lot, but I hate to bring in work terminology, like corporate world work terminology. But the 4 stages of team development, where it's like storming, forming, norming, performing, right? I think
you're still a team when you're storming.
What's that?
You're still a team when you're storming.
Well, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like you're a team in all 4 of those stages of development, right?
Right.
But I think what Ash's point is, that's probably, I think she's right. I think that's the performing stage. And what we are talking about is more of the norming and the form. Well, the forming is definitely happening in Rogue One, right?
Right.
Or the storming is probably happening in Rogue One. And then somewhere in between that, those other 2 stages of team development happen. And by the time we get to Jedi, yeah, I would agree that's when they finally are kind of like, we're all on the same page. We're all working together. We've got, we know how the system works, what doesn't, how to stay elusive. So the Emperor knew what they were doing, but so what? But yeah, we get it. So yeah, I don't disagree.
All right, well, we won't belabor it anymore.
Well, let's talk about more corporate talk if we can here. No, I'm kidding.
So what's the next one we had? So 0 Hour I thought was important for that reason. The next one I had was In the Name of Rebellion, which is season 4, episodes 3 and 4.
That is the one with
that's the Kyber. Yeah, that's what Saw again with the Kyber crystal. And again, I think the one thing that was really important about that episode was there is a comment between Ezra and Saw that says the Empire is on the verge of winning a war that the rebellion doesn't believe has even begun.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Saw is talking about how his world was destroyed. He'll do anything it takes. And again, you just get more doubling down of who he is now compared to where he was in Clone Wars and where we think we've known him and where he's headed towards Rogue One as well. But
yeah,
I really like that quote, though, that the rebellion is in this state of denial, or these cells, maybe it's not the rebellion, but the cells of this rebellion is in a state of denial that there's a war. Like we haven't really fully engaged. Well, Saw's like, no, I've been fighting this war for 5 years, 10 years now, 15 years, whatever it is, and you guys are delusional if you think that we've not been in a war since the Empire, basically became the Empire. And so again, it's another where's the rebellion, and then where is Saw Gerrera within that rebellion, and that discord with Mon Mothma starts to become a little more apparent with some of that too, because I think he takes a couple little jibes at her at her expense in front of Ezra when they're doing that. But also, Saw's stunning Ezra and Sabine, and somewhat betraying them, in order to do what he thinks is necessary with the Kuiper crystal.
Yeah, like I think he's trying to steal it, and if I remember correctly, he stuns them or locks them up or whatever it is so that he can take it. And they're like looking at him like, dude, what is your problem?
Does he take it? I thought he was trying to destroy it.
No, he's trying to destroy it ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing too, and again, this is where I feel like I hope they lean into this in season 2 is the in Rebel Rising, in Catalyst, in season 4 of Rebels, particularly these 2 episodes, everybody's aware that they are talking about, or that they're after Kyber crystals, but they don't have the full picture yet. They still don't understand what's happening. And it's funny too, because like in, we didn't talk about this. It's kind of actually a cool moment in the battle, or the Ghost of Geonosis episode. When they find Click-Clack, they ask him, hey, what was the rebellion? What was the separatists, or the, what do you call them? Yeah, the separatists. What were they doing here? What were they trying to do? And he drew that circle. Remember that? He draws the circle, and then he draws an inner circle, which to us looks like the Death Star. And he's trying to tell him, like, look, they were trying to build this thing. And of course, nobody understands what he's saying. Later on, they find these canisters of gas, and they're like, oh, that's what he was talking about. Like, no, this dude's trying to tell you they were trying to build the Death Star, but he doesn't know how to tell you that. Right. But that's the point. Like, it's so elusive. Like this, they go through great lengths, and it's explained a lot in Catalyst, of hiding Galen Erso and keeping this project under wraps. And most of it's Krennic, right? Krennic is behind all of it. He's meticulous. He's one step ahead of everybody in trying to keep this a hush-hush kind of secret. And so that's where I feel like in season 2, if they could tap into that, because I don't think we've really gotten a lot of that outside of these 2 episodes, because it's mostly in the books, you know what I mean?
Right.
But just alluding to that, there's something out there. They're doing something with these Kyber crystals. I think it plays into what we know from Rogue One, because they talk about how they're collecting them there. It ties into these particular episodes. It ties into what Saw Gerrera is ultimately doing. He's trying to solve this mystery, right? He knows they're out there doing something. He just doesn't know what it is. And so he can't figure it out. So what does he have to do? He just knows, look, I'm going to put a wrench in their system as much as I can. And if it means destroying the crystals so that they can't have them, then I know at least I'm stopping them at whatever they're, trying to do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, this is where it's going to be curious to see where Jedha, surfaces, or if Jedha surfaces at all in the Andor series at all, from a Saw Gerrera standpoint, why he ends up going, or when he ends up going out there, and some of that. And I know that's been explored in some other content, but I think that would be interesting too, to see that start to surface as well. And again, more connective tissue over to Rogue One.
Yeah. Those are good episodes too. Honestly, just seeing the size of that Kyber crystal is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was.
By the way, in Catalyst, I said I wouldn't talk about Catalyst, and here I'm talking about it. In Catalyst, you learn, like, remember there was synthetic crystals were like a thing in Legends? Well, they bring them back as part of canon in Catalyst. And the reason, like the origin of synthetic crystals is because Galen Erso was trying to develop this Death Star, right? But he didn't have access at the time. Well, actually, they weren't even trying to, initially, they weren't trying to develop a Death Star. They were trying to, quote, create an unlimited energy source for like planets and moons or whatever it is, right?
Right.
Of course, the people that he's working for had other ideas and other motives, right? But he couldn't get his hands on Kyber crystals because they were coveted by the Jedi, and the amount of Kyber crystal that he would need was just so great that it just didn't seem realistic for him to even think about. So he goes and he synthetically creates Kyber crystals so that he can use as part of his testing and all of that. So that's how they kind of explain, I guess, the origin of synthetic crystals in canon, when, back in Legends, it was like, oh, the dark side users would use synthetic crystals, and the good guys would use the real stuff, or the organic stuff, the FDA organic stuff.
So, are there any other content? Was there anything else in Rebels, or I know we had talked about maybe talking about Guardians of the Wills, anything in any of that seemed relevant for people to get ready for Andor?
No, I mean it's a lot of the same thing, right? I mean,
Yeah, it just builds on the things we've already spoken about.
yeah, I mean the main themes I think we pretty much covered. And beyond that, I'm trying to think of we brought up the Cassian Andor K2SO origin comic book. We did an episode on that, right? Or have I lost my mind?
No, I don't think we did.
Okay. I could have sworn we did. It might have been when you were out.
Maybe so. It doesn't count. Just like Cato Nemoidia.
that business on Cato Nemoidia doesn't count. But yeah, so there's that comic. If you really want to know the origin of K2SO and Cassian Andor, I don't know, it's not a particularly interesting story, in my opinion.
I have a feeling it's going to be rewritten anyway.
It'll probably get rewritten. Yeah, when we get to season 2. Sorry, they made synthetic crystals canon again. Yep, Catalyst. Go read it. It's great. Doesn't count. So, but no, I can't think of anything else. And then I think we've hit kind of the main beats, the main points. I mean, we certainly talked about the rebellion enough. For all that said, I hate to say this, but I really have a feeling that this series, or at least this season, is going to recontextualize a lot of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think we're really going to, especially when you got somebody like Tony Gilroy at the head, Born Identity. He's like this master of espionage storytelling. That's exactly what we're getting with Cassian Andor. I think we're just scratching at the surface in terms of how many layers are going to be and how complex some of this stuff is. They kind of alluded to that in the interview from the Disney Plus Day stuff that they did, that there is going to be multiple layers and it is going to be very deep and complicated. So, and that's all great stuff. I mean, I think that lends itself to somebody like Cassian Andor and something like the Rebellion, especially the dark side of the Rebellion that we haven't seen so much of yet.
I think something else we might see though is we might bring back, with like Darth Vader with Obi-Wan Kenobi and with Rogue One, we saw the brutality and the vengeance of Vader, right? Just the pure anger and violence that he can bring. And I have a feeling we're going to get that side of the Empire with this series too. And I think when you talk about Gilroy saying it's a bit more adult, I think again, some of those themes about the brutality of the Empire, the uncaring, the willing to, completely subjugate people and enslave them and kill them, hang them in the streets for whatever the reasons might be. I think we're going to be given entirely new reasons to hate the Empire and to show why they are so hated and feared all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And I think it's interesting now that you said it, just the light bulb went off in my head. Like he said adult at first last week, and today he kept saying real. You remember that in the interview? He kept saying
yes,
real people, real scenarios, real. And I think that was probably a better way to say adult, right? More mature content, or just because it is real. It's war, and we've talked about war as being hell, and dirty sides of war, the stuff that we don't want to talk about. And again, I still think they're going to go in this with the right gloves on to tell the story on Disney Plus and not scare people away. But I think it is going to.
But again,
different.
Yeah, I mean, again, what we saw from Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi, I mean, those were pretty violent, Mm-hmm. So I think that there's now a precedent.
Kids' necks? No, come on.
I know, and dragging Obi-Wan through the flames and watching him scream and writhe on the ground. Yeah,
yep.
It's totally fake. It's fine.
Oh,
it's not disturbing
at all. Of that scene with Through the Flames and Fire by.
I don't think it'll have the same effect. Next thing you're going to tell me, you're going to put it like Journey. You're going to have a Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin on fire sequence montage. Okay.
Maybe.
No, Albert. No.
Okay.
Get the newspaper. No.
Shoe fly, shoe. All right. We got anything else? I think that's probably going to do it. We've talked an hour and 43 minutes now.
Yeah. No, I think, again, there's a lot of good content out there. Get ready for Andor. Get yourself psyched up for it. It looks like it's going to be absolutely epic in scale, in visuals, the realism from a cinematography aspect. It looks amazing. And what we've seen so far with the story and some of the acting and the writing all appears to be on point. So all of Rebels, I think in particular, is your strong go-to one. A little bit of Clone Wars, and I think I agree with that. Where I think Rebel Rising is another one of those that's a really good book to go read because it gives you that idea of what Saw and Jin throughout the ages, really looks like, and just again sets more the timetable there. Those sets that stage.
He treats her like a daughter. It's really sweet. And then he kills people at the same time. So he's complex.
He's doing it for her.
Yeah,
makes it okay
to protect her. Okay, well, cool. We'll end it there. Hey, do we got any shout outs?
Oh, shout out, you say? Yes, we do have some. So if you are listening to the podcast, we do a live stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays, cantinacast.com/YouTube. If you'd like to check us out. Special thanks tonight for chatting with us, Jonathan, Lauren, Sky, Steph, Rob, Jorge, Richard, Gary, Katya, Ash, and Ben Stone. So thank you everyone for hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, commenting in the chat. Really do appreciate it. Hit us up on the socials and all that if you want to reach out to us. And remember, listener Q&A is next Thursday. So please send your questions in, cantinacast.com/question, so that we can get those all compiled and answer what's on your mind.
Yes, please do so. Looking forward to that episode quite a bit. Okay, if you watched the Patreon episode, I said I had one thing that I had to get done, and I got it done. So
I'm still editing the Patreon episode.
You haven't heard it unless you're with the live feed.
It's been a very busy few weeks.
So I may get this episode out before the Patreon one.
Actually, I'm going to post the Patreon episode right when we get done here. So
okay,
it's ready to go. It's ready to go.
All right. Well, this one will be out tomorrow as well. So you get two. You'll get two tomorrow morning when you wake up.
Hey, you get a twofer from Topher.
Yep. Okay. We'll see you guys next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.